Well, is the United States preparing for a war in the Middle East, a broader regional war? Well, it sure as hell seems that way. We have warmongers like neocon Senator Lindsey Graham passing a bill to give power to the president to go to war in Iran, just in case he needs it. We're preemptively doing this homework for him. We're going to get these paperworks out there ahead of time. So will American families be okay sending their sons and daughters to fight and die for Israel or to fight a war with Iran? That's the question. So is the United States heading for a broader regional war? What are the larger implications of all of this? Someone whose sources are impeccable and who has been spot on since the outbreak of the war in Ukraine, and of course what's been unfolding in the Middle East, is Colonel Douglas MacGregor. Colonel, great to have you back on the show. Great to see you.
Sure.
So are we headed, you see these moves in the Senate, you see these moves in the House of Representatives, preemptively giving the power to the president. You know, you need to go to war with Iran. Here's the paperwork. We've done the homework for you. Do you think a broader regional war is unfolding, or is this just fluff?
Well, I think the potential for a broader regional war is very, very real. What most of your listeners probably don't understand, or maybe they do, I hope they do, is that people like Lindsey Graham are out there essentially dishing for money. He makes these ridiculous statements, and he and Blumenthal sit down and craft legislation to do what you described, which is essentially, if you want to go to war with Iran, we're all for you. We'll do whatever you like. That means big donors pour money into their political action committees and support structures. They have no accountability in the Senate. They're not in charge of anything. They're not responsible for the armed forces. So it's all nonsense. When there is no accountability, people will say and do all sorts of stupid things. And that goes on all the time in Washington on the Hill. None of those people have responsibility for anything that happens in a war. They just vote for it. They send money and they pay no attention, and then they posture. So let's set that aside for a minute. The problem we have right now is that I don't think we have anybody in the White House. What we have are people in the cabinet like Blinken and Austin and others, and Sullivan, of course, as the national security advisor. And then behind them are lots of people that nobody knows. Some of them are huge donors to the Democratic Party, to the left. Some of them are just self-appointed experts that hold appointed but unelected positions, and they are steering the ship of state in bad directions. We are not interested in going to war in the Middle East. We weren't interested in going to war in Eastern Europe. But that's what it looks like right now, just as it looked that way, last fall in Eastern Europe. We wondered whether or not we were going to see a massive intervention in Ukraine. Now we're wondering about what we're going to do. The truth is, we are even less prepared now and less capable now of taking on a regional war, particularly a war that would involve virtually everyone in the region against Israel and the United States. What you're seeing right now with the Iranian leadership just met with President Erdogan of Turkey. This is after their foreign ministers met. They held discussions. We obviously are not privileged to what those discussions were about, but we do have some speechifying by President Erdogan, who points out the world is appalled by what is happening in Gaza, and we have nothing but silence from the United States and its Western allies. What is wrong with this? Now the Iranian leadership is headed to Riyadh, to Saudi Arabia. These are the major players in the region. One cannot help but conclude that we're watching an alliance coalesce between all of these powers against what is happening with Israel and us. Meanwhile, we're attacking what we say are Iranian-backed Shiite militias and other targets, Syria, Iraq, elsewhere in the Middle East, on the assumption that they all take orders from Iran, which is not really true. They're still independent. The Iraqi militias are nationalist organizations. They may be Shiite, but they're still nationalists, and they're acting on their own. But even then, the little pinprick attacks that they're launching against U.S. positions are just that. They're more signals and warnings than anything else. But they're trying to alert people to the possibility that this could all turn dramatically in a moment's notice into a major war launched against Israel and us. So we send a couple of carrier battle groups. We add some more people on the ground in Syria and in Iraq. We add some air defense units to try and protect our forces from air and missile strikes if they're launched against us. But we're not ready for this, Morris. We don't have the ammunition. We don't have the logistical support structure in place. 2 carrier battle groups are supposedly there to deter. They're not going to deter anybody. They sit offshore in the ocean, very far from shore, because the closer they get to shore, the more danger they encounter. But we seem to think that this is sort of a battleship diplomacy. Either you stand down, or here are our new 21st century equivalents of battleships, even though it's a very old solution, carrier battle groups that we can launch 200, 300 cruise missiles. We can launch maybe 80, 90 aircraft at a stretch. But that's not going to win any wars. And the people ashore know that. And now they increasingly have reach and capability that didn't exist. I mean, the biggest problem that we don't seem to come to terms with, we didn't come to terms with it in Russia. We assumed that Russia was weak and incapable and could do nothing but respond to our demands. We got an education. You have a similar phenomenon in the region today of the Middle East. This is not 1973. This is 50 years later. All of these countries are more capable, both in terms of their populations that are better educated and more capable of acting decisively in uniform, but especially Turkey and Iran. These are nations of nearly 90 million people each. The Iranians have some of the best air and missile and space experts in the world. They put together an arsenal of missiles that could dramatically destroy Israel if launched. Then you have the Turks. They can put 2 million men into the field in a month, and they have an excellent army. They also have new missiles in their arsenals that could easily destroy Israel and actually attack our offshore